Hello everybody, how are you guys doing? My name is Joe. I'm the lead keeper for the avian team at the Akron Zoo, and right now we are at the condor exhibit with our Andean condors. We have a pair here. We have one male and one female. Their names are Grok for the male, and the female is Carlotta. You can see them on a view right there. There's Grok down on the ground by the hut there. We have two of our keepers, Allison and Rose, going to go in and do a little training and servicing of the exhibit. Typically this is a two-person procedure where we go in and one person will do a training session with them while the person goes into the exhibit. Will actually clean the exhibit, take out any enrichment. You see some paper in the exhibit that was given to them. The paper was a lot longer. They do shred it. They'll sometimes carry it into their nest area. Grok is a little preoccupied with what is going on with us right now as opposed to going up for his training session. So I'll kind of back away a little bit here so he doesn't see me quite as much. Carlotta's a little slower for some of the training too. She's not always as food motivated. With the weather getting nicer like it is right now, the temperature's warming up. You know, they already had their breakfast this morning. But typically when it starts getting nicer out here, they do slow down and they're eating a little bit. So we will adjust their diets accordingly as well too. And speaking of diets, looks like this morning they got frozen rats. We got our shipments in frozen. We thaw them out, and they got rats yesterday or this morning. I'm sorry. Other items would be a meat product. Could be quail, could be rabbits, and then other meat products are typically used for the training behaviors. Grok is definitely right now more interested in us at the window and not viewing glass than he is from the training. Preening his feathers, typically something all birds do. Birds have feathers all year round, so they are taking care of those feathers. Imagine us wearing the same clothes for a full year. We want to take care of those clothes, so these guys are taking care of the feathers. And then once a year, typically, they'll go through a molt. Some species may do it a little bit more often, but these guys go through a molt and they'll replace all their old feathers with new feathers. Birds such as condors will molt sporadically. They won't lose all their feathers at once and replace all the feathers at once, which you typically would see with penguins. Penguins will lose all their feathers at once and replace them all, and then condors and birds that will fly typically do them sporadically so they can still fly. Now, Andean condors are found in the Andean mountains. Pretty much the whole western coastline of South America, from the top down to the bottom, is their range. They are considered non-threatened at this time. Their numbers are doing okay. They're not endangered as they were in years past, so they are making a slight comeback. They are a pair that would mate for life. Grock and Carlotta are a pair, so they are 37 years old. Condors can live actually to their 50s. So you got Rose going in there trying to put some more enrichment in there for them. Like I said, Grock and Carlotta are both 37. As a matter of fact, I just looked before coming up here, Grock's parents are actually still alive. And they are 52 and 54 years of age.
How long do they normally live?
And they're up to their 50s, but there was a record of one Andean condor living 75 years in captivity. These guys they're vultures. They call them, and they're considered in the New World vultures with other vultures. And they are scavengers. They don't really use those large feet for grabbing prey like eagles or owls would do. These guys are more built for standing on ground as opposed to being perching in the trees and so forth. So like I mentioned, these guys will just, in the Andean mountains where altitudes of 16,000 feet, these guys are soaring and they're catching these thermals that are lifting them higher and higher, where they basically don't have to flap their wings much at all, living on these hillsides. And these hillsides aren't all snow. In some of the regions there, they're grasslands up there, and there's other mammals that live up there. And they're looking for these mammals that are deceased, and that's what they're going to that's carrion. That's what they're going to prey on. The scavengers, they actually will find these by eyesight as well as smell. Condors do have a sense of smell, unlike a lot of the other species of birds. The gases that are given off by decaying animals are able to be noticed by these guys.
So, Rachel, I don't know if you heard the answer to your question. Grock and Carlotta are 37 years old.
1983.
So, Joe, can you talk a little bit about incubation of the eggs?
Incubation of eggs. Well, condors do breed. They'll lay 1 to 2 eggs. And typically condors that are raising young will lay every other year. The young will be able to fly at about 6 months of age, and they'll stay with the parents for 2 years. And at that time, the parents are going to kick them out of the nest or the area, and they're going to have to be fending for themselves. So they will breed every other year, since it takes that long for them to raise their young. But we have had some eggs laid here with Grock and Carlotta. Typically we see every year, sometimes every other year, but unfortunately we have not had any success in any chicks just yet. We have had some fertility of the eggs, but unfortunately we have not had anything hatch just yet. And like I said, since they are not raising any young, they will typically lay every year. But they have taken a year off in the past, and sometimes they will lay twice a year. And that's very common for many species of birds, that if they lay and you were to pull the eggs to incubate them elsewhere, they will re-clutch and lay another clutch of eggs, 1 to 2 eggs.
Marsha, we have not had any baby condors here yet.
Yes.
There's always hope for the future.
So, like I said, these guys can live in their 50s, and they're only 37, so breeding can still take place. We have Grok down low, Carlotta up at the top. Grok has that extra skin, or they call that a caruncle, or a comb, on top of his head there. That distinguishes the males from the females. He has a little bit thicker collar of white feathers around his neck.
How heavy are condors?
Condors can weigh up to about 30 pounds or more. Grock and Carlotta are in their 20s, about 20 even for Carlotta, and Grok's about 22. Wingspan of about 10 feet or more. These guys, like I mentioned, they live in the Andean mountain region. They live on these hillsides where basically they just have to jump off, and there's very minimal flapping. These are such large birds that the wings are so heavy that they really try to just soar out there instead of trying to keep flapping like you see other smaller birds will do.
Do condors prefer to live alone or in pairs or groups?
In pairs. Like I said, they will mate for life. They will form a bond, and they will stay together for life. If something were to happen to one of the mate, they will pair up with another mate. Their territories are roughly about 120 square miles, so they do have a pretty large area. And like I mentioned earlier, when the young reach about 2 years of age, the parents are going to evacuate that youngster, and he's going to have to find his own territory and a mate.
So have we ever attempted to pull a condor egg?
We have. We do artificial incubation here at the zoo. One of the reasons, so we can monitor the egg a little bit better, and it all depends sometimes on how the parents are doing. Carlotta and Grok are a little overzealous sometimes of the eggs, and one wants to incubate when the other one has it. So to prevent any mishaps with the egg, we will go ahead and pull the eggs ourselves and put them in our incubators.
So what are condors' natural predators?
Really don't have any natural predators, especially as adults. Now, there are some mammals in those regions, foxes or cougars, that will prey upon eggs or smaller fledglings. But once they start to reach that 6 months and they're that large and are able to fly, they really don't have any land predators after that.
Keepers in there cleaning up the habitat, picking up the leftover rats from this morning. So do these condors throw up when threatened?
They do throw up, as many species of birds do. It's not always the best sight. We do physical exams on these birds, typically once or twice a year. And when we do that, we typically do not feed them in the morning, and we let them go, and that way they don't have anything to regurgitate for us. But that does happen. And what's kind of along those same lines is something that's called urohydrosis, where they actually defecate or urinate down their legs. And that's a cooling mechanism that they do when they get overheated. The evaporation of the liquid on their legs will help them cool off a little bit. They don't do that every time they defecate, but there are times that they will do that.
So if a baby ever does hatch here, would it be given back to Carlotta and Grok to raise?
No, that's probably something that probably would not be reintroduced into the pair. They are the established pair. Like I mentioned, now after those youngsters will reach 2 years of age, they need to find their own territory. So if they weren't raised with the parents, we would not reintroduce them back to the parents. They could be introduced to other younger condors, but not back to the parents at that age, especially if it was a male.
How big is a condor egg?
Condor eggs are about this big. It's kind of hard to say, but it'll fit in your hand pretty well. Weight-wise, I have to look it up. We weigh them every year, but off the top of my head, I can't think. But it's a very decent-sized egg. It'll definitely fill up the palm of your hand.
Tina, the Akron Zoo is located here in Akron. We're just west of downtown Akron, so you can actually see the downtown skyline from the zoo.
Grok is still preening up there. Carlotta's up at the top. You'll see sometimes she'll stretch her wings out, and you can kind of get a feel for how wide that wingspan really is. When you say 10 feet, it sounds like a lot, but to actually see that, it's actually quite impressive. And it's not actually even the longest wingspan of birds either. There are certain species of albatross and penguins that actually, or pelicans that have a little bit larger wingspan. They are definitely large birds. They mature about 5 to 6 years of age, so at that time they're ready to find a mate and start breeding, starting their own territories. These guys are, like I mentioned, are what's considered near threatened, so their numbers aren't necessarily as low as they have been in the past. But like a lot of things that are threatened and endangered, human habitation is situation is takes a toll on it. They also are mistakenly sometimes killed by farmers because they think that they're preying upon their stock, their livestock, but actually that's not true. These guys aren't like other raptors that will swoop down to catch live prey. These guys may catch smaller mammals, birds, maybe some mice and so forth, rabbits, but that's the extent of it. They really don't have that gripping feature of their talons. It's actually almost for tearing as opposed to gripping. Like I said, they prefer to sit on the ground. They don't sit in perches and trees where they can grip. So they are mistaken for hunting their livestock, but that's really not the case.
Now, Joe, you mentioned their wingspan, but how large is your wingspan?
Mine's only maybe 6 feet. It's not nearly. There, Grok just flew down a little bit, so you could get an idea of how big that is.
You have the perfect wingspan for social distancing.
So there I go.
So you mentioned they can live into their 50s. So how long would they live in their native habitat?
That actually is in their native habitat. They can live that long, 50 years old. Like I said, there was a case of one condor living 72 to 75 years in captivity. So in the wild, up to 50 years has been recorded. Grok has kind of a brownish eye. If Carlotta was down here a little bit closer, her eye is actually a pretty bright red. But you can get an idea of his wattle there and his caruncle or comb on the top of his head.
So are these the only condors at the zoo?
They are the only condors. The Andean condors. These guys came to the zoo in 2003. And they have been here ever since.
So what would you say their favorite enrichment item is?
They like to shred things. If you think about it, that's what these animals, when they're eating these carrion, they're shredding it. So anything that they can shred, like the newspaper that we have in here, maybe put the newspaper in a box where they can get their head into and pull it out. So they're pretty pretty destructive, and that beak is very strong. You wouldn't think, but their beaks can really tear through some flesh when they're eating.
So what would you say that bare patch on Grok's chest is?
Well, they have a lot of bare patches. I think the condors, when they're eating their carrion, they're getting their heads deep inside the body. So, and to keep their feathers from getting all messed up if they were covered, it's much easier to clean the bare skin as opposed to cleaning their feathers. And you can see the little bit change of color there when Grok gets excited, or if he's courting Carlotta and he starts to get excited and everything, that pink will actually turn pretty bright, as well as the yellowish down lower will actually turn a little bit more yellow as well. So he gets what's called, just getting flush.
So can you explain the different kinds of feathers that they have and what their purposes are?
All birds have different types of feathers. They have what are called their primary feathers, which are the longest feathers on the wings that they're used for their primary flight. Next to those, there will be some secondary and tertiary feathers as well. And then all through the body, they'll just have just a normal plumage of feathers. Underneath that, a lot of birds will have like a down feather that's used for insulation, not nearly as waterproof as the feathers on the outside. But you can see these guys are constantly, like I mentioned earlier, if we were to wear the same clothes for a year, that's how long these birds are going to have their feathers for. They have to take good care of them. They can't let them get damaged and torn and frayed. At the base of the tail, all birds have what's called an oil gland or a uropiginal gland. And what they'll do is they'll massage that oil gland with their beak. It'll excrete some oil, and that's the oil that they put across their feathers. That keeps them waterproof. I mean, the saying of water off a duck's back, and it literally does. It just rolls right off. But they're constantly preening. You can see a lot of those smaller feathers there on his wing as he's preening them.
So do you think the condors have noticed that we haven't had any guests in a while?
Probably a little bit. They do notice the activity. Carlotta especially is very curious to young children when they come up to the window. She'll come down to the glass in the viewing window here where Grok is sitting, and she'll stand very close to them. If it's the eye level that she's on with them, but she's very curious of young children when they come to the window. So I am certain that they notice that the activity is a little bit lower right now. And to kind of make up for that, we will come up here maybe a little bit more often, or provide enrichment more often for these guys.
So all of you who are saying you miss us, the feeling is mutual. Not only does the staff miss you, but the animals are missing you too.
Absolutely so. We got a little pool there that Grok is standing above for them to bathe or take a bath and then drink as well. We also provide a water bottle over there, or a water pan, I should say, over on the other side to share.
All right.
So, I'd like to thank everybody. Thanks for all your questions. You had some really good questions, and I hope we get things back to normal and you guys can come and see Carlotta and Grok and see them in person and just kind of get a feel for how great these birds are and how big they are. Like I said, these are more ground birds, so they're not up in the trees. You can see them, and when they do spread their wings out, they're climbing up to the top. You can really get a sense, and it's actually quite loud too when you hear them flap their wings when they climb up there. It's really kind of a deep roar when they do that. So it's really impressive. A lot of air movement under those wings, but they're really, really neat.
Hey. Thanks, everyone.